Hey, good morning, everybody. Power Network TV, ENTV today. I have the distinct privilege and also good evening for those of you that are listening to this to the east of me across the pond, because I've got a very special guest from that area, Anthony Palacine. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Palestine.
Palacine, great. And you're calling in from England, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Anthony, welcome to ENTV today. It's a pleasure to have you here. And let's just dive right in and find out who you are, what you do, and so just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oof, that's a long
You're
story,
you're
but
you're a high performance coach, so I know you have a lot to share.
I'm a high performance coach, and actually in my childhood I was the laziest, most procrastinating and obese kid. I landed into peak performance out of um just chance and the flow of life.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, what was it about growing up that was kind of the challenge or kind of the mindset, even as a kid, that you were kind of going through, and then lead us into the transformation?
I think one key thing, I was never satisfied with the status quo. I was never satisfied with the status quo of what school was like. I was kind of always bored with what was prescribed to me. And I was also not satisfied with my body, my self-image issues, and also my results in my relationships. So all of that really affected me and really kickstarted my journey in self-development.
Was it, and this is great to have this conversation, because a lot of people go through that. They have these outer influences or whatever it is. What was influencing you that made you lethargic, or just gain weight and feel lazy and so on? Was it a part of the environment, or part of the, rebelling against having to be a part of that? What was it about?
Oh, I think you've hit a few variables on the head, especially as far as environments. I mean, knowing what I know today, everything influences everything. I mean, mental health influences physical health and influences mental health. And there's, I can list 10 to 20 factors that affect each of those independently. Um, yeah, so it's really hard to pinpoint it down to one thing. But I think a few core things that were specific for me were not having the right knowledge, not having the right sense of purpose and motivation, um, and also not having any idea about trauma and all of the influences of the kind of subconscious emotional regulation world.
Sure. Yeah, I can relate to that. We interview so many people here that go through their versions of growing up in kind of an environment that just doesn't support the inner soul, the human being, just inside, all those expectations outside, and so on. So what was the kickstart, Anthony, that began to shift you away from the sofa, away from the TV? What started to happen for you?
It really started with moving. I moved to the US for university, and being independent from family, I was kind of under my own control. Um, I started getting busier as well and working on things that I was a bit more passionate and motivated about. I started as an engineer, actually, which is completely different as well, and that's a whole other story. Um, but I arrived into engineering still overweight and not so confident, having never been in a relationship. And of course, as an 18-year-old, that's like the number one thing that one would want. So I started studying, I started learning a bit more about the gym. I started learning about psychology, about dating, and kind of improving myself. And I started seeing some glimmers of results, but I would always go up and then come to a plateau and then up again and then plateau until I found the next thing. And really, it was just a journey about following from one thing to the next thing to the next thing that kept unlocking more and more results.
It was kind of feeling of moving from a very small environment and picture of life to suddenly now this expansive, oh my God, look what's out here kind of exploration.
Yeah, yeah, exploration is absolutely key. I think one of the biggest years of transformation for me was 2017, where I consciously set out on a path of self-exploration. And I actually figured out, who I was, what were the things I liked, what were the things I don't like. And I consciously moved more towards the things that I liked and away from some of the things that I didn't like.
What's an example of that? What's an example of I didn't like this, but I found I could like this? That
Yeah, I actually didn't like peer pressure. I didn't like drinking and going to the bars. I did it because I wasn't confident in myself and I wanted to meet people, and I thought that was the only way. But instead, I discovered the world of festivals. I went to my first music festival a year before and my first camping one that very year, and that one absolutely blew my mind. It changed everything for me. I started also having mental health symptoms because it created such a click in my mind that said, wait a minute, for the first 20 something years of my life, I've been missing this, and this thing has been possible in this environment right here this whole time. I need to go deeper into that. And it's that music festival that actually started my entrepreneurship journey and made me pivot away from engineering.
was it about the music festival that was so stimulating?
It was community. It was
Um,
community of like-minded people, where everyone is there in cooperation with a shared interest and supporting each other. If someone forgets uh, a blanket, or if someone's camping gas is running out and they don't have enough to cook, you just talk to the neighbor and, oh yeah, no problem, brother, no problem. We'll help you out, and you make friends at the same time as you get helped out. And it's something that is so fundamental to human nature, I find, that is so missing in the 21st century. Um, that it was just that piece of magic that I was like, yeah, I need more of this in my life.
I'm so glad you shared that because that's such a helpful reminder for people. Because if I were to dumb it down and say what I see in the journey you've taken, it really is a feeling and an experience of being alone now to suddenly finding a great community and all the things that led to that. And that's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I grew up as an only child, and I also grew up typically living an hour away from most of my friends. So it was a bit tricky for me, the social aspects, when I was growing up. And so that kind of trickled into my adult life until I found this community that I really resonated with.
So, so how then to take us on now a little bit of the journey of how that finding that community, the like-mindedness, the energy of that uplifting energy, how did that begin to transform your career?
as soon as I went to that festival, no kidding, I went back to my boss on the Monday and I was a changed person. And I knew it, I felt it inside of me. My friends who knew me felt it as well. I told my boss because I'd been super efficient, but also a little bit bored at work because I was kind of getting the hang of it, been doing it for 2 years. And I was saying, I want to work part-time. And I basically not posed an ultimatum, but I said, look, uh, I can do all the work that is needed, but I just don't need to stick around in the office for 40 hours a week if I can get it done in 35 or 30 or even 25. Because back in those times, I would catch myself reading articles in the toilets about things that actually interested me, like psychology, and I would waste so much time, but I had to stay in the office because of the social expectations,
I'm,
particularly because it was an Asian company. I mean, Asian work culture, very traditional, very about sticking into the office, spending as much time as your boss or more to leave a good impression. And I was much more output focused. So that was the short-term effect. I managed to be able to get paid the same and reduce my work hours by at least 20 to 30%. And that freed up a lot of time for my creative pursuits, my self-development, my social life. But in the long term, it's that event that set me on a dream. And that dream, which was my call to adventure, was I want to live a part of my year in festivals. And I'm happy to say that I was able to live that dream last summer by the full summer spending life on the roads, going from one festival to the next between the end of May and the beginning of September. And it was a phenomenal experience. It was one of the most transformative. And I wouldn't have been able to if I hadn't had the motivation or the entrepreneurial aspects that kind of led me there.
it all started because you went to your boss and told him what you wanted.
That is that is one thing, yeah.
Wow, that's a great story. So as you began to uh, explore, being that adventurer, besides community, what started to become the takeaway for you that began to create Anthony, the high performance coach?
So I actually had to come towards my dark times. I had an episode of mental health issues. I was starting to be a little bit manic after that festival experience. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 months later when I had actually decided not to stay in that job. And so I had projected a last day. And it was on the last day of that job that I had an experience that I couldn't even fully explain to this day. But basically, medically, it was a psychosis, hallucinations, triggered by that last day, and triggered by also not really knowing where I was going and what was going to happen. But that whole thing landed me in the hospital, intensive care units for psychiatric conditions. It led to me being medicated by schizophrenia meds to calm me down as fast as possible. It led to a prescription of these medications. It led to me being depressed for 1 to 2 months after the hospital. Um, and it led to me being on medication for most of the past 6 to 7 years. There was 1.5 years where I had stopped medication and then had another episode. But I'm happy to say that the journey has been one of health. The journey has been one of figuring out what was the root cause of that problem. How can I explain to myself what the root cause was? Number two, can I make things better naturally? And three, can I get off the medication? And I'm happy to say that as of a couple of weeks ago, I am officially on the road to zero medication in the next couple of months.
Well, that's amazing. That's beautiful. So in the process of all of this, going through the physical and the mental piece, what has transformed in your outreach of service to help people in that high performance kind of vibe?
Yeah, it goes back. I mean, there are elements that led me to this place, and there is a central reason why these
Yeah.
do. The central reason why, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Physical health affects mental health affects physical health. It's bidirectional, and everything of those 10 to 20 factors that we could list, environment, mindsets, motivations, all of this affects both. So that's one reason to start with performing your best, aligning your habits and your biology with optimal ways of working. But in order to get to that point, because I wished I would have known this 5 to 7 years ago, in order to get to that point, I had to reach a few milestones. Number one, I had to have the rock bottom. Number two, I had to find a strong sense of purpose, which I did by exploring business, by learning business, by getting coached. And I found, wow, I want to do exactly what that coach did with me. Number three, I had to go deeper into spirituality. Mindfulness, meditation, making sense of the unknown, the energetic natures of reality and the universe. And finally, number four, as I was becoming more and more specialized as a coach, I landed on my specific peak performance training, which is all about getting into flow states, thanks to neuroscience. And I thought, wow, this is the perfect thing for me. This is exactly what ties together the things that I was seeking to escape in my life with the activities that I used to escape, as well as how much fun I was having in festivals. But it turns out you don't need festivals to get into flow states. You can just also access it through these other natural ways. And
Sure.
so that's the long story short of high performance, is this idea of flow and really experiencing more flow and happiness in life without forcing things, without escapism, and also without making sacrifices.
So, so if someone were to come to you and they were to say, Anthony, I love what you do. I'm interested in performing at a higher level. Where do I start? What would you say to them?
Where to start is depending on where you're at. I think I'm a believer that there is a broad stroke model that can be applied for everyone, but it's a big model with lots of component parts. And so what component parts you dive deep into depends on how much work you've done on yourself and what kind of work. If you have, and I'll give two extreme examples. If you have done a lot of work around productivity and you've learned a lot of neuroscience, I would say there's no need to start with flow. Maybe start with therapy, or ensure that you're dialed in spiritually, or ensure that you've done a lot of that inner therapy kind of healing emotional work. But on the other hand, if you have not dialed in on neuroscience and high performance and productivity, then that would be the place that I recommend to start, because it's just easy little tweaks that have a knock-on effect, um, to create a positive self-fulfilling cycle. But
What's an example? What's an example of one of those little tweaks? If somebody needs to start out with the basics of what you were just saying just now, what's an example of a little tweak maybe that you did or that you see in people that they can do?
one of the very classic little tweaks that we hear about a lot is to not look at your phone, not look at social media, not look at emails first thing in the morning. And it's great to know the what, but it's even better to know why. Why? If you're going to do that, you're going to raise your levels of dopamine dramatically. And when you start to move away from whatever that task was to something that is less stimulating, you're going to want to go from here to here. Your brain isn't going to want to do that. Your brain is going to want to stay here. And so you're more likely to stay on the phone or do something that is less productive than the deep work. So you better just not stimulate yourself super high yet, and just start with the deeper work. And I think it's really helpful to know the why to actually help implement it. I mean, this is one of the secrets
Sure.
that I'll share today. Um, but it's little tweaks like that around understanding your neurochemistry and understanding the behavior changes you can make by understanding the reasons why, uh, there are some ways of being that are more optimal than others.
Beautiful, beautiful. As we begin to kind of wrap our interview today, Anthony, I always love to ask these two questions. It's very thought provoking. If the Anthony of today were to say something to the Anthony of 10, 15 years ago, what would Anthony today say to that Anthony of all those times ago?
You know, it's a funny question because I have actually experienced that.
Yeah.
I was in a healing ceremony using a sweat lodge as the
Mhm.
medicine, and one of my goals was to reparent my inner child, but myself. And the thing that came out of that was, it's gonna be okay. Like, I can see the future. I am you. I am living that future timeline, and it's all gonna be okay. You have nothing to be worried about. Just keep on going, keep following the path, stay true to your heart, stay true to your values, and life will unfold in magical ways. Trust me on that.
Well, so second part is what would Anthony of all those years ago say about the Anthony that he's observing of today?
I think that's wow, I cannot believe it. I mean, if this is what life is gonna be like, then I am so excited for the rest of it. And all of the problems that I'm seeing today, they really don't matter. They are the fuel to my motivation. They are the thing that makes my story so amazing and worth telling. And I'm just so looking forward to it.
Sounds like the Anthony of today would be a great mentor to the Anthony of a long time ago.
Yeah, totally.
There you go. Wow, this has been a great conversation, Anthony. I really appreciate it. How can people reach out and connect with you?
I've got a website, which is www.palacin, palacin.co.uk, or Facebook. I'll be here in Messenger. Yeah, I'll be in the comments, so don't hesitate to reach out by Facebook.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Any last parting words for everybody listening here at ENTV today?
I'll say one thing. I used to think some things were impossible, and after all that I know now, and particularly being inspired by the cutting edge research of flow, I am absolutely confident that anyone can achieve anything. It just depends on the kind of support that you need and the path that is unique to you. But whatever your goals are, never settle. In fact, multiply them by 10 because you can do it.
That's a great one there. I love that. Think bigger. You think you got that? Go long.
Yeah.
Great. Anthony, so great to have you here. What a pleasure.